Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we were discussing the topic of kleshas, which is a fundamental topic, as I said. Without understanding the mechanism of what klesha does to our mind, we can't understand yoga. But before I just resume the conversation which we had, resume the discussion we had, we have to understand there are four fundamental principles of Patanjali's yoga. There are four basic assumptions which are necessary, just as when we study Vedanta, we have what is known as a Prakarana Grantha. Prakarana Grantha means these books introduce you to the concepts of Vedanta, because the concepts have to be defined first, and then only we can understand the theoretical framework of Vedanta. The practical aspect, of course, comes later. But even to understand the theoretical framework of Vedanta, we have what is known as Prakarana Granthas. For example, the idea of Atman, the different koshas, the different levels, the different selves. The Annamaya kosha, the physical body, the Pranamaya kosha, or the vital body, or the life forces which run the physical body, and then we have the Manomaya. So also in Patanjali, the definition of certain terms like kleshas, vrittis we discussed elaborately in the first chapter, because the second verse itself says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. But it will be not out of place to just recapitulate, because to understand the mechanism of klesha, how it affects our thinking and it affects our entire life. So before we start the discussion on the kleshas, we continue our discussion on kleshas. We have already discussed it very elaborately. We have to understand the fundamental four principles of yoga. Patanjali's yoga. I'm talking of only Patanjali's yoga, because there are other yogas also which were developed later on, Hatha yoga. Swamiji's Raj Yoga is based on Patanjali's yoga, though it is not confined or to only Patanjali's yoga, because we have the theory of prana which he has taken from the Upanishads. He has also taken the idea of Kundalini, which he has taken from Tantras, which was another practical method of applying Vedantic principles to our daily life. So Tantra is based on the principle of Shakti, which can be considered to be equivalent to the concept of Prakriti. Prakriti means nature, which is always considered to be feminine in nature, and so also Shakti. And the concept of Shiva can be compared to that of Shiva or Shakti. That is how Tantras define it. So it is not exactly the male principle. For convenience, it has been termed as Purusha and Prakriti. So Purusha is somewhat similar to the concept of Shiva, and Prakriti is somewhat similar to the concept of Shakti. So in the Tantras, we have this idea of Kundalini. So Swamiji's Raj Yoga, if you see, it is a combination of Patanjali's yoga, which is a separate system of philosophy. You have to remember, though it has a lot of common things with Vedanta, but we have to remember that yoga school has its own concept, especially when you deal with the concept of mind. They have gone very deep. Vedanta definitely discusses the mind, the manas, buddhi, chitta, and ahankara. And then it also discusses the vrittis. But there are certain terms which are unique to yoga, which you will not find in Vedanta. We will try to find out the rough equivalent of what it means. So when you study yoga as a system of philosophy and try to understand Patanjali's yoga in that light, then you have to remember that you should not confuse some of the terms with the Vedantic terms. So the four principles which you have to remember, which form the, you can say, the basis of yoga. The first fundamental principle, as we all know, we have discussed it, but it's worth recapitulating, that there are two fundamental categories, Purusha and Prakriti, just as there is Shiva and Shakti, or Brahman and Maya in Vedanta. They are basically the same. Only the way you look at it and the way you define it, that changes. So one thing is common between Vedanta, Tantra, and all other Indian philosophies, that Purusha is the only conscious principle. So there is a conscious principle or some kind of principle which gives rise to awareness, the sense of I. I comes much later, but that awareness or the conscious principle which gives the inert Prakriti some semblance of activity. Purusha by itself is incapable of expressing as the world or the creation. It is, Prakriti is absolutely necessary. And Prakriti, according to the Sankhya philosophy, which forms the basis of yoga also, Sankhya and yoga, they have almost similar uh, theoretical structures. So Prakriti is made of three gunas. Now you have to understand what these three gunas are and its impact on the mind. Because when we come to yoga, which is controlling the vrittis, it is easier said than done. It's easy to say that you just control your thoughts or control your vrittis. Thoughts are not just thoughts, is the expression when vrittis are recognized or when they are manifest, they become thoughts. So thought is a very loose word or a very gross word, but vritti is a very, very technical word. We have to understand that. Now, there are these three gunas which undergo evolution. The combination of three gunas, which we have discussed, is what constitutes the entire Prakriti. So, Patanjali or the school of yoga, as well as the Sankhya, that is Kapil Muni, who started the Sankhya school, they have found out that these three qualities or gunas give a distinct nature to every human being, every plant, every inanimate objects. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So it is so fundamental that even Vedanta accepts it, this idea of Prakriti. Whether you say it's an evolute of Shakti, some terms may change, but whether you say Shakti or Prakriti, it is the same. So one of the first evolute of the three gunas, of Prakriti is Buddhi. Buddhi is more fundamental than the mind. See, only in Indian philosophy, we distinguish between the, you may say, the discriminative mind, which is known as Buddhi, which can distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. That is Buddhi. It's a function of the mind, but at the same time, that mind is not the manas or the reactive mind. Reactive mind is a kind of primitive mind which animals have, which plants have. In fact, every living being has a type of rudimentary mind. That is manas. That is just a extension of our indriyas. That mind, even in fact, Vedanta says manas is also one of the indriyas. It's a finer indriya. Indriyas are sense organs, like the 5 Gyanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas, 5 organs of perception, like hearing, seeing, tasting, and touch, and so many. There are these 5. Touch, smell. Smell is one of the indriyas. So these give you some kind of knowledge, some kind of perception of the world around us. And the Karmendriyas, in conjunction with the mind, manas, they give rise to the responses or the reactions. So there is a stimulus of the Gyanendriyas which manas deciphers, and instinctively it gives rise to some kind of response. So this simple theory, simple mind which animals have, where they just respond to the external stimuli, and that external stimuli results in this functioning of the manas. So manas is a lower mind, if you can call it. You may say it's a grosser mind because it is just something finer than the indriyas. Perceptions by themselves are not capable of inducing some kind of response, but it is the mind which uh, acts as a intermediate. So it is also considered to be a 11th sense organ. So we have five sense organs of perception with their subtle counterparts in the brain, and we have five organs of action which have their subtle counterparts in the nervous system. So nervous system is one of the pranas which give enable a human being or a plant or animal to react. So the reaction and all this is controlled by the central or autonomous nervous system. There are two, but they don't go into so much detail because they want general principles. They go to the root of the problem. They don't want to find out what is autonomous and what is the other nervous system. So the nervous system is one of the nerve energies. Surprisingly, it comes under the category of prana, which is another theory which has been borrowed from Vedanta by Swamiji. You won't find the idea of prana in Patanjali. But anyway, he has taken the idea of prana because nervous energy is one of the pranas, like digestive energy, the assimilation, then we have breathing, the power, the nervous energy which is responsible for the pumping of the lungs and the beating of the heart, which are connected with each other. And then we have, that is prana, apana, the gravitational force which pushes things down. Apana, udana is the the prana which is responsible for maintaining the body heat. So they are very sound principles, and Vedanta has given a lot of importance to these pranas, whereas here they are giving more importance to the gunas. So Gita is a beautiful synthesis which synthesizes the pancha prana, the pancha kosha, and even the Upanishads speak of it. And what has been added by Gita, which you won't find too much in the Upanishads, is the idea of vritti, and the idea of the idea of you can say the kleshas. So what are these kleshas? We have certain ideas which are known as samskaras, but we'll come to all these things in detail. So the first principle, as I said, fundamental principle is Purusha does not undergo any change. He is the conscious, it is the conscious principle. Only difference between Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta and Yoga is that there are many Purushas, which Advaita Vedanta says the consciousness is one. Why do you need many? Only apparently because of the limitations, we think that we are separate. That apart from that, every conscious being has a consciousness which sheds its light upon Prakriti and the various combinations of gunas, three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. We'll discuss what it is. They give they result in all the creation and our reactions, our mental states, our physical changes, changes in the prana life force. Everything is decided by Prakriti. But Prakriti by itself is powerless. It's it is only because of the Purusha, the conscious principle, that animates the Prakriti. Prakriti is jada or inert. It is something like an inanimate thing. But whether it is inanimate or a living being or a non-living being, the consciousness pervades everything. So you may ask, where do you, from the modern biological understanding of consciousness, people will laugh in the West if you say a stone is conscious. That is not the consciousness which is typical of living organisms is different than the consciousness which we speak of in yoga or Patanjali's yoga or even in Vedanta. That consciousness, some of the Sufi mystics have very clearly said that these consciousness is to be found everywhere. It is all pervasive. Then why don't we see that consciousness? in a stone. Is a stone conscious? They say stone is also conscious. If you go at the microcosmic level, the fundamental level, there's tremendous play of energy there. The consciousness that retains its identity as a stone or as a metal or as a any inanimate object, water, they have some kind of consciousness which is appears to be stationary, but it is conscious all the same. There's tremendous activity going on there. For a stone, for the molecules of the stone to retain its identity as a stone. So stone has a stone ego, just as a man has or a plant has its own ego. But it is quivering, as the Sufis say. Consciousness is static, appears to be static, not static, appears to be static for normal human beings. Think that their consciousness is static in a stone. That's what Sufis believe. Then they say, which is of course derived from Vedanta. But the same consciousness is slightly quivering. They are using the word quivering in the plants. It is not as conscious as animals or human beings, but still there is a consciousness in them. So consciousness is static in the stone, quivering means it's just has a semblance of activity, but you can't see it very clearly. But still the plant grows, everything happens in the plant kingdom. They may not have a definite sort of consciousness. They may not be so clearly, but plants are conscious, and it's only a difference of degree. The change in consciousness between animal and plants, as Jagdish Chandra Bose found out, it is just a question of degree. They also have their sensitivity. So plants are conscious. Amoeba and all the bacteria, they are also conscious. Even the virus, which apparently are unconscious things, they just it's a mechanism which keeps on multiplying, but even there is some consciousness. If an inanimate object is conscious, then even the viruses are conscious. But in animals and human beings, the consciousness is manifest, it is most active. So that is another fundamental principle we have to remember. Now this consciousness, when it percolates through Prakriti, all our sorrow is a result of that. Because we see the consciousness in something which is inert. And when that consciousness goes away, there comes sorrow. For example, we think there is consciousness in the body. There is definitely, according to medical science. But then what happens when that consciousness goes away? We die. So we fear death. We fear so many things because of the change. Prakriti is always constantly subject to change. And because our nature is pure existence, eternal existence, it does not want to, it detests the idea of losing its identity. Or change means death. Change means transformation. It somehow wants to retain its identity. So that is why they say we have all these fears, fear of death. Fear of death is nothing but fear of losing the body. But if that goes away, some other fear comes, fear of ego, losing the ego. So there are higher fears, lower fears. So that has been beautifully compressed into one word, that is abhinivesha. That is one of the kleshas. We'll come to that. But the second fundamental principle which we have to understand in yoga is that it is actually a Sankhyan principle. He says, how do we perceive things outside? And he says there is only one kind of cognition, knowledge, and that is known as khyati. Ekameva darshanam, khyatireva darshanam. That is the Sankhyan that has been taken by yoga. So all the perceptions that we see is because of vrittis. So that's why it becomes very important. I mean, it is there is paramount importance in understanding what this vritti is. So according to the Sankhyan philosophy, cognition, any cognition, whatever we see, whatever we perceive, whether it is through eyes or whether it is through sound, but we have to perceive. So what is that perception? the external object strikes our four organs of knowledge, and we get a perception. But how does that perception, what is the form, what is the nature of that perception? So Sankhya says vritti. So it's just like a stone, though this example is not a very perfect example. We'll see it why. You drop a stone in the water, ripples are created, and these ripples go on expanding, and then the quite calm placid lake or the pond, it forms, it gets a shape. So all our uh, cognitions, all our things, our sorrows, our joys, our happinesses, everything is a result of vritti. So how to end sorrow? To stop these vrittis. So yoga is very clear when it says that these vrittis have to be somehow controlled or totally stopped. Chitta vritti nirodha. We discussed that. So there is no vritti, you do not see the world. There is no cognition. You can't perceive the world. So Purusha, then what about the Purusha? What does it do? It is Chaitanya, as Vedanta says, it is of the nature of consciousness. But it cannot know itself or anything else without a vritti. So vrittis are very important. I mean, important in the sense, vrittis give rise to perception. This fact we have to understand. So vritti is a modification. What is a vritti? What is the water? A stone, I understand. It is some kind of impetus which gives rise to ripples. But what is this water? The water has been compared to chitta. Chitta is jada. It is motionless. Chitta is the mental stuff. It is just nothing but subtle matter. The moment a stone is thrown, the moment a perception takes place through the eyes, immediately it has a tendency to form a vritti. But this vritti is continuously, there is a bombarding, there are stones are being thrown every second, microsecond. So, but one important thing is that at a time, at a particular moment, there can be only one vritti. We often talk of multitasking, that I am doing 5 things at a time. I'm talking, I'm seeing. But if you see, Patanjali says it is a illusion that you think that you can multitask. You cannot multitask. And in fact, multitask drains away all the energy. So that is why there is a idea which will come to now, which is known as ekagrata or concentration. What it actually means, the technical meaning of ekagrata. That means hold on to one particular vritti for a long time is ekagrata. What is the problem if there are many vrittis? Then our knowledge also becomes hazy. So when the light of Purusha, the consciousness falls upon the mind stuff, which is known as chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff, the water in the lake. And throwing a stone, the ripples are nothing but vrittis. And then when the ripples form, you see different shapes and different perceptions take place. So whether it is a gross perception of external objects or a vision or some internal perception. See, perceptions can be of two types. When we meditate on the Ishta is not there. There's no God. I mean, we have to imagine, we have to create, but it is equally real. That is a fundamental principle of dhyana. When we sit to meditate, we have an object on whom we meditate. Maybe it is a lamp or it is a light. There is this idea that objects can be external as well as internal. I have to remember that when you say we are meditating on an object, don't think that we have to create a vritti only of external objects. Even if you close your eyes, you can imagine a certain object and continuously meditate on that. It's a very difficult thing, but that is the essence of meditation. Without trying to visualize, it's not necessary to visualize only a form. It can even be a sound symbol. Any symbol which has an external reality. Say we meditate on Krishna. Krishna is an external reality for us. We have some idea of Krishna. And we meditate in the heart. So it is an internal object, but it is object all the same. Whether you meditate on an external object or internal object, vritti is formed. And every vritti gives rise to jnana or knowledge. So even the supernatural visions, some objects, some people have the visions of Devata, some people have the visions of mantras. The Gayatri mantra and all these Vedic mantras, they appeared to the rishis. Swami Vivekananda says the mantras came to them as shining objects. They came to the rishis, and that is why they are so powerful. It is not just any word which human beings have created. They are literally condensed ideas. So when you say Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam, it is not just that Vishwamitra Rishi or whoever is the Rishi of this mantra, he just sat down and composed a verse just as we compose poems. No, these are sound symbols. That is why it is known as mantra. So whether you meditate on sound symbols or visual symbols, outside or within, suppose you hear a mantra, there is a sound. But suppose you hear it once. In fact, when you take initiation or meditation, techniques of meditation, normally they will tell you, meditate on the sound. You will hear the mantra only once. Later on, it is the sound symbol which you have heard once, which has become part of your memory. That's why they say one has to be very attentive when the sound symbol is heard. Just as if you have a hazy idea of the object on whom you are meditating, say you are meditating on a particular deity. If you externally, if you are not very well versed and if you have not constantly visualized that deity for a long time, then when you close your eyes, it may be just a blank. You will not see the deity. So the object inside is also an object on which meditation, it is also known as object, but it is an internal object. So all the consciousness, whenever the consciousness of Purusha falls on an object, external or internal, they produce vrittis. That is the second fundamental principle. So you have to remember that. So even emotion is also a vritti, just as willpower is a vritti. We have three types of vrittis. The vritti to act, that is willpower. The vritti to feel, though the classification in Western psychology is thinking, feeling, and willing. The willpower, the thinking power, the cognition. But Patanjali does not distinguish. He says it is foolish to distinguish. Even emotions, he says, what is feeling? It is nothing but a cognition. It is a vritti. So he combines all the perceptions that we have, experiences that we have. They are nothing but vrittis. You may say it is an emotional vritti, vritti of emotion, vritti of fear, vritti of... You can classify it. But you can't say they are different vrittis. The vrittis which are responsible for seeing something or vrittis which are responsible for hearing something, they are different types of vrittis, but they are all vrittis. So, in order to be conscious, yoga, but mainly they deal with cognitive vrittis. There are, of course, other vrittis like bhavana, that is a feeling which we have, but all are dependent on the cognition. How do you get a feeling of joy? Suppose you see a rose. You have to first see the rose to get a feeling that it is beautiful. Feeling comes later. So everything can be reduced to cognitive vrittis. That's why Patanjali says they are all subsequent vrittis which come, like emotion and other things. But basically, without perception, there is no vritti. So that is the second principle, that vritti is everything. If the whole creation, the whole purpose why we are living and doing all our activities and interacting with the world and feeling happy, feeling depressed, feeling all sorts of feelings and cognitions and hallucinations, all these things are nothing but vrittis of different kinds. But they are vrittis all the same. And the motive power, as we discussed in the first principle is Purusha, not Prakriti. If Purusha disconnects from the Prakriti, then there is no creation. For creation to happen, the conscious principle has to percolate. Then creation. So except Purusha, which is pure consciousness, all things in Prakriti undergo transformation every moment. In Tantras, it is known as Chit Shakti. Chiti Shakti or Chit Shakti. Now in the Chandi, you will find that. That Shakti Rupena Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Samsthit. So that Shakti, that power, is known as Chiti Shakti. Chiti means the Shakti which is an attribute of Prakriti. Nature by itself has no Shakti, but Chit or the consciousness creates that power which is known as Chiti Shakti. But we are in yoga, we are not bothered about that. We are bothered only about our mind. We don't want to know how many evolutes, because for us, the control of the mind compared to other animals and plants and other beings, we have a highly refined mind. So that mind is of paramount importance. There is another theory which Vedanta says, the subtler a thing, the more control or power it has. A grosser a thing, the less powerful it is. So since we know mind is more powerful than our prana and also the body, the effect of body is there on the mind, but the effect of the mind on the body is much more. So thought or vrittis, control of vrittis is the only concern or the main concern, you can say. Patanjali doesn't waste time. He says everything is in the mind. And that idea, perhaps, if Patanjali has come before Buddha, then you can say Buddhism is based on. Otherwise, this is a Buddhistic idea, as you think, so you become. So Buddha gave so much importance to thoughts. He said, by changing your thought, you change your personality. Every transformation that you want is just a transformation of the mind. So that is as far as the importance of vrittis. Now, one point has to be made clear here. Of course, Swami Vivekananda in his Raj Yoga divides the mind into 4 categories, which is for convenience. Patanjali does not do. You have to remember that. He does not do because he says whether it is buddhi or manas, lower mind or higher mind, he says whatever it is. If it is a lower mind, it is a lower vritti. Higher mind, it is a higher vritti. So he is just bothered about how to control the vrittis. But Vedanta wants some distinction. Vedanta says the mind has been divided into 4 parts. It is just for convenience to understand. But Patanjali says it is all known as chitta or antakarana. Antakarana means the mind. Mind is one stuff according to Patanjali. He says it is a stuff just as you have eyes, you have ears, you have nose, you have the indriyas, you have the nervous system. So also you have a subtle mechanism which is known as antakarana, which is fine, but still it is material. So mind is also material. But Patanjali, Vedanta says that there are different layers of the mind. One is grosser, the manas, then we have buddhi, then we have ahankara, and then we have chitta. But here, when Patanjali says chitta, he refers to the whole mind. Even the manas comes. It is a manifestation of chitta only. Now what this chitta is, we'll try to find out. This constant change of vrittis that is taking, it is, as I told you, compared to the ripples on the lake. A stone is thrown, but it should be understood here that these ripples, the whole mind, that is the chitta, transforms it into a vritti. Now I'll give you an example. Suppose you throw a big stone. The whole mind, for the time being, is not a placid lake. It's a vibrating, it's so many concentric circles. Vritti actually means concentric circles. It has the word vartula. Vartula means the circle. The circle, because whenever you drop an object in the water, you'll find that there are these concentric circles. So vritti literally means concentric circles, but it is also mental waves. When this is just a simile, the simile should not be taken literally. So there can be only one vritti. Unlike in a lake, that simile doesn't work, because in a lake you can put 50 stones at the same time and there will be different vrittis. No, that's why this simile doesn't is not a very good simile, but it gives some idea. Because there, according to Patanjali, in one mind, in one individual's mind, there can be only one vritti. Even sleep is a vritti, which we discussed, 5 different types of vritti: nidra, smriti. We'll not go back into that discussion. We have elaborately discussed. But Patanjali says, at one time, there will be only one vritti. You can't be sleeping and you can't be awake at the same time. You can't have a nidra vritti and a other vritti of which wakes you up at the same time. Either you are sleeping or you are waking. And similarly, multitasking, which we think we are hearing and seeing at the same time, it is wrong. The gap between the vrittis is so small that we think everything is happening simultaneously. That is an illusion. When you listen to me, for example, I am talking, you are seeing me speak. Sometimes there is a lag, you might have noticed. The sound does not, but even if there is no lag, if it appears to be simultaneous, no, it is not. You are not listening and watching at the same time, but it is fluctuating. You are watching or listening, listening, and it's a microsecond. You can say it's a fraction of a second. It's just a very small moment between these two vrittis. So first you have a visual vritti of me speaking, then you have a sound vritti, then it alternates. That is why this constantly changing multitasking exhausts the mind. Mind has a capacity to think. But if you trouble it, you say, what is restlessness? Restlessness makes you tired. What gives rise to mental exhaustion? It is this constantly changing vrittis. And the scientific reason why we should meditate is, if you have one vritti, you conserve a lot of energy. The same vritti repeats again and again and again. So Swamiji says meditation gives you the highest, greatest rest. Even sleep will not give you, because in sleep, you think you have only one vritti of sleep. No, it is just for a fraction of seconds you are having a sleep vritti. Immediately there is a dream vritti. Dream is as bad as waking state. So you think you're at a loss to understand. I slept for 8 hours, but still I'm so much exhausted. Why? Because you have not slept. If you had continuous sleeping vritti throughout, Patanjali says you would have even 2 hours of sleep is enough. But the problem is we need more, because we did not have this sleep vritti which gives us some kind of temporary relaxation. Nidra vritti, which we discussed in the first chapter, that is not constant. Every nidra vritti for 2-3 seconds, perhaps we go into deep sleep, we get some beautiful rest, immediately a dream vritti comes and disturbs everything. It is as bad as these nightmares and dreams. Sometimes good dreams may be useful, but still it is a dream. After all, vrittis have to be stopped. Yoga means only one thing: chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta means not the Vedantic chitta, the chitta which is the total mind. So all the vrittis have to be stopped. And that is the only thing that will help you to get rid of all sorrow. As Buddha said, Buddha, of course, told it in a gross way. People will not understand this vrittis. He said desires, because from desires come vrittis. So he said desires are the root cause of all problems. So he gave a very simple solution, more practical than yoga. He says, give up desires. He gave a practical solution. But unfortunately, the logic behind why we should, of course, he explains, but yoga goes deeper. For a scientific mind, yoga explains why we should not desire. Otherwise, we will ask people, we will ask the guru or whoever tells us, we'll ask even Buddha, No, no, I want all my desires and I will fulfill every one of them. Buddha will just laugh because he says, what I have want to say, I have told you. If you want peace, if you want nirvana, if you want to solve the problem of life, this is the way I have found. You follow it. You don't follow it, it is your problem. The desires are going to produce vrittis. So in fact, Patanjali is more scientific in the sense, it's not that Buddha was not scientific, he was very rational. He found the cause of sorrow, which is desires. But here they say, Patanjali says, whether it is desire or anything else, vrittis are painful. And the more vrittis you have, the more painful your mind is, chitta is, and the more pain or main suffering you have. So the day you detach yourself from the vrittis and the mind becomes calm, then you have eternal peace and happiness. You become one with the Purusha. So yoga means actually separating the Purusha from Prakriti. Purusha is by itself peaceful. When it comes with in contact, as it were, Vedanta says it is just Maya. It never comes in contact. Brahman is always Brahman. Maya just makes Brahman appear as if, but for all, that is a very high state of realization. But before that, we have to understand that we are very much experiencing these sorrows. Patanjali was more practical, more pragmatic. When he said that you feel the sorrow, as Buddha said, don't bother about God or all those things. Just tell me whether you feel sorrow or not. Are you feeling sorrow? Are you feeling physical sorrow, mental sorrow, causal sorrow, sorrows due to desires and samskaras? If you are feeling that, then I'll show you the way how to get rid of sorrow. So, Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti. Of course, it's a Vedantic idea, nothing unique about Buddhism, because Vedanta long ago, all the texts say the goal of life. If you say God realization, people will say you are mad. I don't want God. I'm much happy without God. People are living without God. Why do I need? So that's why Vedanta says, or Buddha says, don't bother whether there is a God or not, but at least do you accept a fact that there is sorrow? So Atyantika Dukkha Nivrutti, all sorts of sorrow, that nobody will say no. Only a mad person will say that I want sorrow always. Otherwise, a normal human being will definitely want to get rid of sorrow. Atyantika Dukkha Nivrutti and Paramasukha Prapti. So where is that Paramasukha? Patanjali says it is in the Purusha. Purusha is left to himself. If he doesn't mix up with Prakriti, then he is happy. But because it gets mixed up, the three gunas come into play. If Sattva is there, still you are a little happy. If more of Rajas is there, your mind becomes more restless, more vrittis. And Tamas makes the vritti so dense that you totally feel lost. So the idea is, what Vedanta says, that you transcend the mind. What is the same thing yoga says, you still the mind. Transcending the mind in Vedanta, which says the mind is also a lower existence. So you just go into that Turiya state, which will come to it later. But that has not been discussed in Vedanta here. But here we say that when you concentrate, the fundamental idea behind this third principle of yoga is that whenever you concentrate on an object, external or internal, the mind appears to remain steady. Say, for example, I am meditating on my Ishta. I repeat the mantra, or forget mantra. You just repeating, seeing the same image again and again. You get a feeling that, oh, my mind is still. I'm just focusing on my Ishta. No, the mind is not stationary. The mind takes the form of that object on whom you are meditating repeatedly. The same vrittis rise and fall in succession. It is so quick that you think there is a continuous feeling that you are seeing, but actually you are seeing the Ishta every second. It is vritti comes, before that vritti dies, before another vritti comes, you repeat that vritti. Don't allow any vritti to sneak in. If you do that, your meditation breaks. So the constant repetition of a particular vritti, it has like a film, if you see a film, there are 16, they say in 16 frames should pass in 1 second to get a feeling that some motion is happening. If you see the technology behind, because our mind is so alert that if it is slower than that, we'll see that the film will not play properly, will not get the actual feeling that somebody is doing some action. So for every action, every movement, the reel has to pass 16 frames pass in 1 second. Then we get a feeling that something is moving. That is how we get an illusion. So also in meditation is also an illusion. We say do constant japa or maybe constant visualization. When we do it more and more faster, the same image is in the for a longer period of time, then you will find that you are able to clearly visualize the Ishta. And moreover, what happens is, how do we make progress in spiritual life? Every vritti that is formed, it leaves a samskara. That is another yoga theory, another fundamental principle, that nothing is lost. It is like one vritti, it produces samskara. Another vritti, 50 times, that is the secret behind repetition of the mantra. When you constantly bombard the mind or constantly produce the same vritti again and again and again, the samskaras become strong. And what does samskara do? The role of samskara is to create a similar vritti. So afterwards it will become effortless. If you say, for example, you are learning to do something, some skill. You do it once, second time you make a mistake. But do it many times, multiple mistakes come. But if you do it constantly, then without any paying attention, it becomes a skill. You call it a skill. In the beginning, you make mistakes, but later on it becomes a perfect art, a perfect skill. So also, the constant repetition of the vrittis create the vritti of that particular Ishta on whom you are meditating. And these samskaras, Swamiji gives a beautiful example. For example, if you see on sand, if you go to any beach, those who live near the coast, they might have seen, the sand is never flat. It has a wavy type of surface, the sand. And provided, of course, the waves are there. If there are no waves, then the sand may be flat. When the waves become flat and they go back, it has a tendency to make. But further you go from the coast, from the water, you will find some wavy things in the sand. Now Swami Vivekananda compares this wavy texture of the sand to our samskara. So every time the water comes in a particular wave form, it creates a particular impression on the sand. So the next time when water comes, it has a tendency to follow that same form. So that is how our mind is full of waves, either good waves or bad waves. If bad waves are more, then we have a bad samskara. So it's a very wonderful logic which says that you can make yourself or break yourself. That is the next principle. So chitta means that all mental processes are rise and falls of vrittis. They are natural processes. Then where do the gunas come? So you will find that the three gunas have a very important role in creating these vrittis. That's why Swamiji says, when you are very tamasic, you get up, at least do some activity, do some rajasic activity. So, and then you have hope that it will go to sattva, because they are increasingly subtle. Tamas is the lowest. So you can say the inert objects are full of tamas. They don't move, they don't do anything. The plants are little less tamasic. because they grow, at least they move in one direction. Animals are more rajasic because they run around and they do many other things which plants don't do. And finally, man is sattvic. When you graduate from rajas to uh, tamas, then you go to a subtler level of the mind. But the mind itself, the vrittis itself can be divided into three. When tamas dominates, your vrittis subside and it appears that you have become vritti shunya. That's why there's a lot of confusion between sattva and tamas. You see a person who is very dull, he's just closing his eyes, and another person sitting near him who is meditating, he is also closing his eyes. One is utterly tamasic. That mistake we make. Oh, we think, oh, what a wonderful person he is still sitting still. That is because he is incapable of thoughts. He has gone into a dull state. He has become jada. There's no consciousness. Whereas sattva also externally is the same. There are no vrittis, but the consciousness is full. So this constant change from tamas to rajas and sattva, the mind is never in one state. So when the same vritti comes, we call it sajatiya. Sajatiya means same type of vritti. For example, I meditate on Sri Ramakrishna in my heart. One vritti of Ramakrishna is there. But suddenly another vritti will come. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. Some kind of distraction will come. Then I say, no, I want to repeat the same thing. So that is known as ekagrata. Constantly repetition of one vritti. But don't think that it is one vritti continuously going. No, every time you repeat or every time you meditate, the vrittis are coming very fast, even in sattva. But every time one vritti is over, again you meditate, you use your willpower to think about the Ishta or meditate on the Ishta, then the sanskara is formed of Sri Ramakrishna or anybody on whom you are meditating. So if you have always been jealous, then the jealousy, samskara of jealousy becomes so predominant that you, even if you don't want, the moment you see somebody doing something nice, you feel jealous. Then you don't understand. That is why Duryodhana, when Krishna told him, why did you do it? You have been educated. He was educated by the same Guru, Dronacharya. So you were told what is good, what is dharma, what is adharma. So he says, Janami dharmam nachame pravrutti. I don't have a pravrutti. Pravrutti is another word. It comes from this vritti. So we'll discuss it later. But he says, I know what is good, but I can't do it. And I know what is bad, but I can't avoid it. Why? Because of the samskaras. So the type of vritti that arises in the mind is determined by the external perception of the samskara or the samskara within. It can be either because of external stimulus. For example, you just have a habit or too many strong vrittis of smoking a cigarette. Now, this too much of smoking has created an inner samskara. So there are two reasons why a vritti is formed. One is when you see an advertisement or when you see a shop where there is your favorite brand of cigarette, you just go and buy it. A vritti has been formed, the desire has come, now I should smoke. But suppose there is no external stimulus, you are just closing, but still the samskaras, internal samskaras are so strong, the external perception is not there, but every external perception, every time you smoke, you purchased cigarettes and you had a smoke, it has created an internal samskara. So even if the object is not there, in some cases only when the object is there you get tempted. But sometimes it is so chronic, the samskaras, that in spite of the object not being there, you run after that object and you say, no, I can't. My mind is constantly, the samskara is bubbling up. So if the logic now behind this is, in the chitta, the samskaras are there, the impressions. So if you want to change the vrittis, you have to change the samskara. So if you want to control the vrittis, how do you control the vrittis? It is easier said than done. Because Duryodhana said, I can't do so. Because his samskaras were so strong, he says, I don't want to become evil, but somehow my mind is always thinking of adharma. I don't know how to stop it. So it is like, then how do you reduce the effect of these samskaras? So if you want a particular vritti to come again and again, so that you follow dharma or be a good man, then you have to keep the bad samskaras in check. Now, how it is to be done, that is known by kleshas, which we discussed now. I'm coming back now. We will come to the topic of kleshas. The kleshas are these samskaras. The samskaras give rise to kleshas, and the kleshas give rise to sorrow. Kleshas are the cause of sorrow. And we discussed what these kleshas are. They are raga, dvesha, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha. So 5 types of kleshas are responsible for everything that we do, mainly sorrow. Klesha means it is painful. So klishta means painful. So klishta samskaras are known as kleshas. Aklishta samskaras, that is good samskaras, which are painless, they can be used to counteract the painful samskaras. So what are the painful samskaras? Avidya, ignorance, thinking one thing to be other. Avidya gives rise to asmita, the ego. The ego sense, if somebody hurts you, if you are not egoistic, if a child, if no matter how much you scold the child, it will simply look at you and laugh because there's no ego. So all our misery starts from ignorance, then ego compounds it, and then ego further, it divides into raga, dvesha, which I have discussed many times. That raga means trying to run after things that you like. Dvesha means avoiding things that you don't like. So very simply put, Patanjali says there are only 2 types of samskara, kleshas which really affect you. One is raga, you go after things that you like, things that you don't like. So strong likes and dislikes. And then there is one more samskara which he says is the predominant samskara, that is abhinivesha, that clinging to life, that fear of death. Now whether you call it fear of death or clinging to life, it is a samskara which is there in animals, in plants, even in the small creature. Even the virus doesn't want to die. It wants to somehow survive. It doesn't bother if it kills 100 people, but it wants to survive. That's why it mutates. So also animal kingdom, plant kingdom, you will find that desire to preserve the individuality, cling to that life, that physical gross life is so intense that even if we know we are going to die, we somehow feel or somehow wish, as Yudhishthira said, that's the greatest miracle of the human mind, that even if a person knows that we have a fixed lifespan, he never thinks I'm going to die, I'm immortal, because of that immortality which is within him. So we will conclude now. We have had a discussion. We'll continue from where maybe I'm getting stuck at this particular topic, but it is so important. Otherwise, we can quickly skip and go, but it will not help us. We are still in the process of having a firm grasp on the idea of these kleshas. They are so important. They are the cause of sorrow. They are not sorrow. Kleshas by itself, they are obstructions. They are painful obstructions which cause sorrow. So we need to know how to remove those. Then we can get rid of sorrow. So you can't get rid of sorrow by dealing with this. You have to do dhyana. The practice of dhyana is to reduce the effect of samskaras, which is known as tanukarana, means make it so ineffective. If you can't burn the samskaras, at least make it ineffective, that it does not create a havoc in your mind. That is what Patanjali says. So let me see if there are some questions. There appear to be, there are quite a few questions. I'll quickly. Yes, one is a remark. It's not a question, it's just a statement. So I'll just read it. Jagdish Chandra Bose says, inanimate objects, plants also have live properties, consciousness, but that cannot be projected. Yeah, it's a question of how much of the consciousness is manifested. As the Sufi saint said, that consciousness is there, but it is static in the stone. So also in the plant, it is quivering, but it is fully active in the animals. That is true. Maharaj had never heard that revealing explanation of vrittis. So the question is, what is dream vritti then? Is it a causal state? No. Dream is one, if you have not attended the previous classes, I took almost 6 to 7 classes on vrittis. Of course, if you can go back in 2020, you'll see. Fortunately, we had all our talks downloaded from Facebook and we have put it on YouTube. I would advise you, because vrittis is something which if I try to repeat it, then I'll have to repeat the whole thing. Dream is also a vritti. It's a vritti, it's a type. Vrittis are in 5 categories. I'll briefly tell you what it is. But one of the vrittis is, swapna is a state. When vrittis are vrittis, whether it is in dream or waking state. In dream state also, though there is no external object, they are as real as the Jagrut. We have 4 different states: Jagrut, that is waking state; Swapna, that is dream state; Sushupti, which Nidra, which is also a vritti. Everything is a vritti. Any feeling or any emotion, any thought, everything is a vritti. So dream involves thought, so it is a vritti also. You can't say it is in the causal state, because the causal state is not something. Causal state is where our samskaras are. So the tendency to create thoughts, create these vrittis, is what is known as causal, karana sharira. So you don't mix it up, because Vedanta believes in sthula, sukshma and karana. Karana sharira means the causal state. So they said there should be a cause. Why I am getting 50 evil thoughts, whereas somebody else is getting only 20 evil thoughts per minute? That is because of the karana, the samskaras. So they are samskaras. So the dreams also, that is why Freud did so much of research in dream analysis and all. Because if you constantly get nightmares and dream, that means there's something wrong. The kleshas have not been addressed. So it is definitely every state, waking, dream or sleep, is dependent on the causal state, but it cannot be equated. Causal state or karana sharira is the receptacle of our samskaras, but dream is not the only vritti. Dream is one of the vrittis, or dream is one of the states. You cannot even call it a vritti, because in dream we have different vrittis. So dream is not a singular vritti. Your dream and my dream may change. I may have a good dream, you may have a bad dream, or vice versa. That means the vritti keeps on changing. So Patanjali has not classified dream as a vritti. Smriti is a vritti. Smriti is a vritti because it has a tendency to produce another vritti. So we have different vrittis. We'll not go into the discussion, but definitely dream, swapna is not considered to be, technically is not considered to be a vritti, because in sapna you have different vrittis. Now somebody is saying, I have experienced sometimes while going to sleep, as I meditate, when I lie down, I see myself outside my body. I can see myself and my body as if I am outside. It seems a few seconds to me. Then I feel I am inside my body again. But I then feel as if I have rested for many hours and completely refreshed. Not sure what is going on, but listening to today's talk, it seems that I don't know what you mean by grottos. What does that word mean? Anyway, the vrittis go away. Vrittis, not grottos. It is with vrittis. Typing mistake. Go away for a few seconds. No, it is not like that. When you get that out of body experience, that doesn't mean the vrittis have stopped. You see, this bodilessness is, you may feel it, it can be a very strong imagination. It may be a very strong vritti that some people dream that where is my body, where is my body, some say strange kind of feeling they get. They feel some kind of bodilessness even in dream. So these are different vrittis. The fear that perhaps the idea that I am deprived of my physical body, and that deep fear also can be responsible. So we cannot have one particular cause for this feeling. There are many causes why it happens. In fact, some autistic children also feel this. You know, they if you find some autistic children, they have to be pinched. They suddenly get panicky. They have to put some heavy weight just to make them feel the body. So there are so many reasons for this bodilessness. We can't single that it is a spiritual experience or anything. Because autistic children, suddenly there is a disconnection happening, and then they feel that I don't have a body. And then they have to be pinched very hard. Sometimes they bite their finger. If you have noticed, these people just bite. See, I can't feel my body. So once the pain comes, then again the body consciousness comes. So that is their way of bringing back this temporarily lost body consciousness. So it has nothing to do. They are also vrittis. To really feel that bodilessness, that happens only in samadhi, the highest nirvikalpa samadhi. So occasional experiences like this, they should not be taken very seriously. If it happens, there may be many reasons. We have to find out what is the reason and try to be conscious. That is more important. When you become conscious of all these different states, this bodiless state, or tremendous attraction for the body, heaviness of the body, everything is felt by the ego. So you have to be consciously experiencing all these things and trying to detach yourself. So the only way these experiences can be understood or tackled is for the consciousness or purusha to detach itself from prakriti. Prakriti plays so many tricks of the mind, tricks of the body, tricks of our life forces. So it is full of tricks and full of illusions. That is why Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta says they are all Maya, so difficult to surmount. Gita, Sri Krishna says, Mama Maya Duratyaya, my Maya is so confusing. Without my grace, it is only through my grace you can transcend it. Okay. So, one new message, last one. Seems there is a risk of developing unripe ego when we live alone and retire mixing little. Now, it is not, external conditions do not determine the status of our ego. Thakur lived with everybody. In fact, he was so busy. If we live in solitude, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. If you live in company, there are advantages but disadvantages. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna recommended that you should go to solitude. So solitude is not such a bad thing if we really handle it. So there is no, of course, there is a risk of developing an ego in any state. Whether you are living alone, then you become, there's some kind of self-importance comes. So sometimes they say you have to expose yourself, and when other people hammer the ego out of you, then it is good. So sometimes when if you are left to yourself, there may be a tendency that your ego gets puffed up. The ripe ego, as you said, the unripe ego. That is why the ripe ego has to replace the unripe ego. Ripe ego means I am a child of Thakur, I am a child of Sri Ramakrishna. If we constantly do it, then solitude can be used positively. But if the unripe ego, if we can't think of God, then we'll think of mammon. So you can't think of both. As Jesus said, you can't have both. You can't have all the fun of the world and also have God. So you have to sacrifice one. Of course, the proportion in which we can live without certain things of the world, we lessen our needs. That is left to us. Some people may need more things, some people may need less things. So that vairagya has to be combined with abhyasa. So if abhyasa by itself will not succeed in making our mind steady, it has to be combined by a gradual vairagya. If it is intense vairagya, then you get immediate results. But if it is not possible, if we can't give up, then we can give it up slowly. Okay. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. So we'll have our Saturday class. Tomorrow it is the Gospel of Holy Mother as usual at 7. But I have one more class, Sri Ma Sharda Devi as Saraswati, which is a special talk. Maybe it is just 25-30 minutes. That will be around 3. So the links will be sent to you. If you are interested, you can attend that also.